On this episode of China Uncensored, 10 signs China's military is weaker than you think. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Now, as an American propagandist, intensely jealous of China's rise, I'm torn. On the one hand, I want to portray China as America's greatest threat. On the other hand, USA #1! I mean, sure, China has the largest standing army in the world with 2.3 million people, a military budget of $120 billion, and spider tanks. Actually, let me clarify. China doesn't have the largest standing army in the world. The Chinese Communist Party does. According to the Congressional Research Service, the PLA is not a national army belonging to the state. Rather, it serves as the party's armed wing. Important distinction to make. All the top generals are Communist Party officials. It'd be like if the Republicans and the Democrats had their own armies. In fact, new soldiers have to swear allegiance to the Communist Party, not to protect the Chinese Constitution or, the Chinese people. But it turns out that China's People's Liberation Army might not be as powerful as you think. And here are 10 reasons why. Number 10. Hey, you know what's super duper important for a military? Joint command. That's when the different branches of the military, the Air Force, Navy, Army, can work together and know what the other one is doing. Now this is something every major world military has, except China. Oh, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry. This just in. A state-run China Daily article reported that according to the Defense Ministry, a joint command system is on the way. Ah, well, okay, that's good. You gotta give credit where credit's due. What's that? Oh, now state-run People's Daily and the Defense Ministry are denying it? Well, it seems like it's not just the military that can't communicate. Number 9. The People's Liberation Army is really cheap. According to the Pentagon, the average U.S. soldier is so loaded up with the latest high-tech gear that it costs $17,500 to equip him, or her. A Chinese soldier, on the other hand, is only given $1,500 worth of gear, and the gun makes up almost half of that. The helmet comes in a distant second. Number 8. Some of the equipment they do have, well, a lot of soldiers today can't even fit into. According to research from China's General Armament Department, Chinese soldiers on average have grown taller by 2 centimeters and 5 centimeters around the waist. That means they're too big for their own guns and tanks. And even though China's military spending has gone up to $120 billion a year, a lot of that is just going into reconfiguring currently existing equipment. Number 7. Even if they don't have the latest high-tech equipment, the People's Liberation Army has great forward-thinking minds like Vice Admiral Zhang Zhaozhong. In 2003, Zhang predicted that U.S. troops would never take Baghdad. Literally hours later, U.S. troops marched into Saddam Hussein's palace in Baghdad. And Zhang also predicted that ousted Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi would never be found, just as Libyan rebels were dragging him out of his hideout. Zhang also said Beijing smog really isn't such a bad thing because it could block America's laser-guided missiles. Number 6. China is the only country that's a permanent member of the UN Security Council that has never built their own aircraft carrier, though they did refurbish one they bought from Ukraine. Anyway, it had to dock shortly after launch because of suspected engine failure. Number 5. Every year, the PLA swells by 6 million new recruits. Now, that might be cause for alarm if it weren't for the fact that they're gone after a month. College freshmen are required to undergo military training before classes begin, but a lot of that time is spent learning how to goose step and being led through forced renditions of patriotic songs. Now, that might not be quite as effective in wartime as, say, a drone. Number 4. Now, you'd think one of the most important parts about learning to be a soldier would be to learn how to be a soldier. But in China, political and ideological indoctrination is first and foremost. 20 to 30% of their training is devoted to studying party propaganda, singing patriotic songs, and going over the finer points of Marxist-Leninist thought. Except during induction training, then it's 40%. Number 3. That might not matter much because Chinese ground troops aren't exactly fighting in a lot of wars. In fact, the last time Chinese troops were deployed en masse was 1989 Beijing. Number 2. New recruits to the PLA aren't exactly Rambo. 60% of college students applying for military service fail the physical exam, according to Beijing's Army Recruitment Office. The problem, the recruitment office says, is because students are overweight, weak, and have bad eyesight. In fact, Beijing has twice lowered standards for physical fitness for those applying for military service, first in 2008 and again in 2011. And number 1. Since all the top brass in the PLA are basically communist officials, China's military is riddled with corruption. According to Business Insider, military graft is so pervasive it could undermine China's ability to wage war. Several high-ranking members have been expelled from the party and arrested, including Xu Saiho, who was the top military official during former party leader Hu Jintao's administration. So let's sum up. If you combine all of the above with the fact the People's Liberation Army hasn't been in overseas combat in about 30 years, and you have a dangerously unprepared, untrained military that is controlled by people with no actual military expertise, and whose primary concern is perpetuating the Communist Party's power. Actually, China's military sounds kind of terrifying. So I'm going to hide under my desk, but while I do that, be sure to leave your comments below and subscribe for more episodes of China Uncensored. And anyone else who wants to join me down here, perfectly welcome. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time. The 3 rectifications and 1 demolition campaign is, in theory, geared towards removing illegal structures. But in reality, the illegal structures on the lists are all pretty much churches and temples. And by 1 demolition, they mean hundreds and hundreds of crosses and scores of churches. But who's counting? May 13th is World Falun Dafa Day, which is apparently a thing. More than 8,000 Falun Gong practitioners from around the world made their way to New York City last week to mark the occasion.